Last thing she ever said was that we'll always at Paris. Nothing like a final twist of the knife on the way out. Even then, I always hated the place. And now, it's a jungle out there. It's tough work finding folks who don't want to be found. I don't blame them. They're the worst I've seen since the bunch Caesar dealt with back in '52. I'm surprised they had the gall to show their faces. Something about them just eats away at you. So I'm told. Now I'm not sure what's true anymore.
Ah, Preston, how was your vacation? Day longer and I would have fired you. A month in the city of love, just what a sourpuss like you needs. You say hi to Brigitte in the Moulin Rouge for me? No? Okay. What you got for me? The Kagots. This better be good. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. In the modern day, the ability to code is basically essential to gain any work in an environment that earns you an actually decent chunk of change and, more importantly, has air conditioning. With the average US median salary for back-end developers averaging over $100,000 in 2024. That chunk of change with the ability to feasibly work from home is quite tantalising, isn't it? But thing is, learning to code is actually quite difficult. There's a reason that journalists haven't gotten into it yet. That's where today's sponsor, BootDev, takes the stage. BootDev is a nifty service that intends to make the intimidating and glacial nature of coding a lot more approachable, and dare I say, fun, by grabbing a cohesive coding course in Python, SQL and Go, or TypeScript if you're so inclined, and then gamifying it. All the while, you're getting a thorough education in your chosen language. And make no mistake, I do mean actually gamifying it. Not just milestone stickers to try and trick you into thinking that you're progressing, no, as BootDev has a full-on XP system with leveling, quests, achievement items, and even community boss fights. Like, I was going to ask how they manage that, but the whole point is learning to code, so it's kind of redundant. With an AI talking bear as your assistant and a flourishing community on their dedicated Discord, BootDev is making the arcane craft of coding much more feasible to actually learn and employ. To get in on this, just go to boot.dev and use code COUNTDANKULA for 25% off your first year on the annual plan. Again, that's boot.dev and use code COUNTDANKULA for 25% off your first year. Welcome to Race Review, the show where I dig knuckle deep into the disparate groups to find out the most esoteric, exceptionally written and funniest cases of racism ever. The one race to rule them all. And today, we will be delving into the phantoms of the Franks, the Gaulish ghouls, the Occitan oddballs. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about none other than the Kagots. An ethnic group with all kinds of slurs and even nursery rhymes about them to remind everyone of why they hate them. But the problem with the Kagots is no one actually has any idea who they are. Let me set the scene for you. The year is 1219. You are French. I know, dry your eyes because it gets much worse. You live in a place called France, and you're in an environment surrounded by people in a similar predicament. I know, but just stay focused and power through the horrors. I believe in you. Despite this hellish situation, you trudge on and make yourself acquainted with your community, learning that you are in a small village in the western reaches of this doomed land. You also quickly come to learn that one of the families of this village, who are tucked away in a little grotto off the beaten path that nobody dares to venture into, is not like the other families. You inquire as to why. Perhaps they are Catalans, or Basque, or even Gypsies, perhaps. No to all of them. This family is something much, much worse. For you see, they speak and sound just like you, and they even look just like you. However, unlike you, they are Kagots. And that's all you need to know. So, what does that little thought exercise teach you? Absolutely fuck all, because that is literally all we concretely know about the Kagots' interactions with the French. Let me elaborate further. You see, the Kagots are a group mired in mystery, because unlike basically any other societal group that I'm aware of, they're essentially Schrodinger's Vogue. They simultaneously do and don't exist. You see, usually an ethno-linguistic group has some sort of look, foodstuff, language, religion, skin colour, or even a series of events that shapes them into a cohesive thing, which helps you to be able to identify them. Whether that be Jews with their very strict religion, long history as a scattered diaspora, and hummus, to the Spanish for the Reconquista, flamenco, playing with horny cows, and fucking loving gold, to the English, who are easily identifiable for being fat, having ugly women who look like dogs, and having the worst breakfast fry-up on the British Isles. Yeah, I said it. The full English is fucking shite. Who the fuck wants tomatoes for their fucking breakfast? I don't care if they're fried, you clearly just stuck them on the plate to LARP as being healthy, you fucking pansies. Get that manky Mediterranean shite off my plate. Come on, the full Scottish. Oh, what's wrong, little sissy Saxon? Are you scared of a little bit of sheep's lung on your plate? Well, maybe it's just because we don't want to eat sausages that look like dicks, but you guys just seem to love that so fucking much. Imagine being afraid of dying before you hit 50. You fucking pansies. You get my point. As vain as it is, the many cultural idiosyncrasies paired with language, religion, and geography almost always results in the identifiable groups that we all love and love to hate. But that's where the Kagots differ. Because they're French. And no, I don't mean that rhetorically. I do mean that they were, for all intents and purposes, literally fucking French. Ethnically they were French, linguistically they spoke French, religiously they were Catholic, just like the French, and they were culturally and physically indistinguishable from their French peers. But they were still considered a completely separate group and treated as such. And I don't mean that they were just a little bit shunned here, or excluded from certain events there, or people rolled up the windows on their horse and carts whenever they walked by. I mean that this group had full-on segregated church fonts, that being the pool that holds the holy water. The churches even had dedicated doorways just for Kagots. The church had them fucking segregated. So you might be thinking, damn, it must be tight as fuck being a Kago. You get your own dedicated entrance and reservoir of god juice all for yourself, alongside seating, no less. What seems to be the problem? Well, here's the deal. Those doors, well, they were actually intentionally designed to be slightly too small for the Kago to force them to bow as they came into the church. And those seats, well, those are literally the worst ones. Tucked away in the back corner of the church, being the furthest away from both the priest and the eternal flame. To, of course, reflect the fact that you filthy Kago, are tainted and the furthest away from God's love and salvation that you possibly can be. You fucking mongrel. As for the holy water fonts, well, that was because you were considered such a spiritually and morally compromised abomination that the thought of you even touching the normal people holy water would essentially defile and spoil all of it. Basically, you were such a corrupt and horrific being that you could overrule God's power. And thus, you would be relegated to your own font. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, no, I'm fucking not. Apparently, in the 1600s, a Kago in Brittany got his hand cut off and nailed to the fucking church door for daring to lay a hand on the font that held the normal people holy water. This was hardcore discrimination. They even made the Kagos wear symbols to identify them, that being a duck foot, which actually raises a very good question. How the fuck could you tell if someone was a Kago? Well, here's the fun part. If they're not wearing their little duckfoot symbol, you can't. So, how did the humble French peasant identify a Kago in their midst? Well, it's simple. Their surnames. But not really. Because remember, they're French and as such have the exact same sort of surnames as their French peers. So, the actual French people had to adapt their practices. So, and I shit you not, the individual villages that had Kagos started making up fucking nursery rhymes to remember the surnames of Kago families. Busting rhymes to throw ancestral shade at your neighbours that lasted for a few fucking centuries. So, I've told you the who and I've told you the how. But all this does is beg the why. Why are the Kagos hated so much that they warrant this kind of treatment? Well, whilst, as previously stated, we don't know any actual concrete distinctions or justifications for the Kagos' existence, we do have theories and accounts that may shed some light on the nature and origin of the Kagos. Theory number 1. They are Cathars. And for those of you who don't know, the Cathars were a heretical Christian sect that malingered around southern France and northern Italy. And they believed in such things as consolamentum, and they had very heavy Gnostic influences in their teachings. That's all a topic for another day and for another person, because I honestly don't think you would all want a monk like me to rattle off about theology. Regardless, the Cathars were essentially wiped off the map in 1229, during both the Albigensian Crusade and the later medieval Inquisition. And no, these two events were not inconsequential, as the total body count lay around an upwards estimation of 1 million dead Cathars. Which, for the 1200s, is pretty fucking ridiculous. Theory number 1 posits that the Kagos are actually the last remnants of the Cathars. At least the ones that fled westwards and folded back into mainstream Catholicism. But they were still tarred as being those weird webbed feet Gnostics. This is one of the more grounded theories. Theory number 2. The Kagos are actually the descendants of Visigoths. Now, you should know who the Visigoths are. They're not an alt-punk thing. They're one of the groups who sacked Rome and proceeded to occupy swathes of Iberia and southern France. And, as you may expect, the Kagos were the leftover Visigoths who didn't get absolutely mugged out of existence by the campaign of Clovis I. I'm starting to notice a little bit of a pattern with these theories. Theory number 3. The Kagos are cretins. And no, I don't mean that as a slur. I mean it in the literal old-fashioned way. As in, this theory posits that the Kagos were the descendants of lepers, who, for their debilitating illness and so that they wouldn't spread it to anybody else, were cast out of society to be quarantined. And I feel like I don't need to explain to you how this isn't possible. Because, amongst other things, we do have access to the bodies of actual known Kagos, and we can see that they did not have leprosy. They were, however, slightly inbred. Because, well, nobody would want to even touch, let alone fuck and have kids with a Kago, except other Kagos. Theory number 4. The Kagos are actually the descendants of the carpenters who built the cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on. Which, does actually kind of fit because the Kagos were all mainly carpenters due to them being banned from any job that involved touching other people's food. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want those treacherous, lecherous, devilish fiends touching my grain harvest with their fucked up claws or whatever it is they have. An alteration of this same type of theory manifests in the idea that the Kagos were either a forsaken carpenters' guild that had somehow fallen into some disrepute, or that they were instead the descendants of bricklayers that built none other than Solomon's Temple, who were then subsequently banished from the Holy Land by God himself for doing a shit job at it. Say what you will, but a lot of these origin stories go pretty hard. Then there is theory number 5, which is somehow the most reasonable sounding, but also the most boring. The Kagos are just Basque gypsies who moved and settled north. Which, to be fair, the Kagos were reported to also exist in the Spanish portion of the Pyrenees, and that they are home to a group of Roma coincidentally called the Cascaros. Cascaros, Kagos. The names are very similar, so that's a little bit interesting. But again, all of those are just theories. We still to this day have absolutely no concrete evidence for why the Kagos were segregated completely from society and why they were treated so badly. So, I'm just going to give you a few commonly believed traits of the Kagos and leave the conclusion up to yourselves. Amongst the French, there were a few choice characteristics that defined the Kago, including, but not limited to, sexual deviancy, cannibalism, leprosy, heresy, sorcery, and being werewolves. Yes, I'm being serious. Also, they were allegedly prone to well poisoning and just being intrinsically evil. Yes, all of those were actual commonly believed traits of the Kago. So, by this point, I'm just as confused about the state of these people as all of you are. So, I've decided to contact an expert about these sort of things. So, I'm here today with our race expert, Professor Edward Dutton, and we're going to ask him a few things about the Kagos, right? So we have an image. Now, bear in mind, we've already had a bit of a discussion where we know that the Kagos are completely indiscernible from the average French person, even though the average French person is a little bit of a mutant, which makes it even harder to discern who the Kagos are. So I'm going to show you this image, and you have to try and tell me who is the Kago.
Who is the Kago?
Yes.
I imagine it's probably the perfectly normal person in the middle in the yellow T-shirt or something. Wouldn't that hit the one that just looks French? But I've no idea. You've already told me that they're indistinguishable from the normal population. So it's a bit like the Barakumin in Japan. You have this underclass in Japan that people don't want to marry and they find taboo and disgusting. But you can't tell from looking at them who they are at all. All right, let's go for the guy in the yellow T-shirt, but it could be anybody.
Well, the problem is we don't know. We've actually no idea who the fuck Chicago is in this. But see what you just described with the Japanese there? Nobody wanted to marry them. They were an underclass. Nobody wanted to go near them. That was the same problem that the Kagos had. The Kagos ultimately all ended up very, very inbred because they could only marry within their own circles. So basically, there was a lot of cousins getting together and stuff like that, and so they ended up becoming kind of mutated and all that as well. So basically, in this picture, it was just a bit of a joke. We wanted you to sort of go through each person.
Well, you can do. I mean, I can say the first one's obviously part black, so I would say he's probably not a Kago. He's a half caste. The guy in the middle. I mean, we can't. Oh, so is that a rude word now? What am I supposed to say? Mixed race. The guy in the middle. The guy in the middle. Well, am I wrong about that? But he looks pretty. He looks pretty mulatto to me. The guy in the middle is obviously some kind of mutant with his neck beard and his overweight and he's weird looking and strange and whatever. So I mean, I has some sort of tag attached to his ear. I don't know what he is. So he's peculiar. But that would have to be a red herring if you knew who the Kago was. There's no way you'd present him. Then in the middle, I don't know what the hell he's doing. But he just looks like some sort of hipster bloke. I don't like the cut of his jib at all. And these are presumably all friends of yours, aren't they, or people that I'm going to meet later, like on that TV program from the '90s where you criticise the band and then you meet them later. And then the guy, that's just presumably what's going on, all right? They're all your mates or something. They're all from Kilmarnock or wherever it is you come from. Coatbridge, somewhere like that. Okay, and then the chap in the yellow, he's obviously his chest hair's a bit high. Don't know what's going on there. I mean, there's a reasonable amount of chest hair that any chap should have, and there's just kind of going for it. But he's kind of done that. But I can't say much about him. He just looks French. And then obviously the guy there, it's just a sort of a French onion-selling supervillain, isn't it? In a red hat. I mean, that's just a comedy thing. And then the guy on the end just looks a bit like that pop star that young girls like, but he's got glasses. Is it Ed Sheeran? I can't. I've nothing. He's like Ed Sheeran, but with glasses and in shock.
Yes, essentially.
And that seems to be him. That's all I have. But these are presumably all friends of yours that I'm going to meet at some point at a party, and they're all going to be cross, aren't they?
No, you probably will, but the thing is, the ones that you can tell that are friends of mine, they're actually my staff, and they're huge fans of yours, so the fact that you've roasted them is just even funnier.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was their idea for me to do this. Well, all of that was painfully inconclusive. Maybe we should just judge the Kagots by their attitudes and behaviours in the modern day as opposed to historically. After all, times change and so do ethnic groups, so how many Kagots are there today? Well, that's the thing. We don't know. Because during that little fucky-wucky known as the French Revolution, a non-insignificant group of Kagots saw their chance at salvation. They mobilised and took advantage of all of the mayhem to break into government buildings and destroy the birth certificates of all Kagots, leaving them functionally impossible to identify because once they take their duckfoot armbands off and move to another area, they are completely indistinguishable from the average French person. They just became a ghost people. Now, I don't mean to alarm you, but there could be a Kagot in your house right now. They could be anywhere because we can't see them. They could even be walking amongst us. It could be you. It could be me. It could even be Ed Dutton for all we know. Now, despite my evident piss take of the Kagots, I must put on my critic's hat. As, despite the convoluted and outright schizophrenic descriptions of them that really don't help describing them in the slightest, I find the idea of a race that got abused into existence a rather good subversion of expectations and a refreshing twist on the whole abused minority trope. A race got racismed into existence. That's not how that's supposed to work. And then they just fucking vanished. They just completely vanished without a fucking trace. No one has any idea who the Kagots even are now. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows what they look like. They just up and vanished. Except they didn't really. They just moved around and blended into society. But they are not talking about being Kagots. There are no Kagot community centres or support groups or even a fucking Facebook community. There is nothing. Like, most places have like a centre, like you've got the Irish centre or the Polish centre or you've got the centre for whatever diaspora here. The Kagots have nothing. They have erased all traces of themselves. They basically burned the files and hid amongst society. But they still know that they are Kagots. They're just not telling anyone about it. Probably because they remember the treatment that they received. But I just think that's interesting. There's just a secret hidden race living amongst us. Or maybe they really just don't exist anymore. And what makes it even funnier is, despite all of the extreme hatred for the Kagots, to the point where there were literal racist nursery rhymes that literal fucking children sang, and the fact that even the fucking Catholic Church segregated them, no one, not even historical texts, can explain why the Kagots were even hated in the first place. I just don't think it's fair to hate a race for no reason. All of the other races, at the very least, give us some pretty good fucking reasons. I just think it's amazing that an entire race of people who didn't have their own language, didn't have their own culture, didn't have their own religion, literally no differences whatsoever, they were completely indistinguishable from the average French person, and they were, for reasons that we don't even know, completely segregated out of society, treated absolutely horrifically, and were universally despised for hundreds of years, because people invented literal fucking nursery rhymes and songs to pass down through the centuries to remind everyone to hate them. And then that same people destroyed all documents and evidence of itself and just fucking vanished. We don't even fucking know who they are now or if they're even still around. So this rating is being tempered by the weird spot that the Kagots inhabit in the racism canon, alongside their lore being a little bit too haphazard and not competently written with a few plot holes here and there. So, as a result, the Kagots have earned themselves a race review score of 7. Tragic, considering that the idea is solid, but the racism just isn't consolidated enough into a cohesive narrative, and sadly it doesn't serve much of a modern purpose. Because why should you learn about a race who are hiding from you and you can't even tell who they are or where they are or if they're even still around? So if you can't even find them, how are you supposed to hate them properly? That would be like learning mammoth hunting. Sounds fun, sure, but sadly, my friend, that ship has fucking sailed. But hey, one thing that I think we can all agree on is, despite the fact that the French are a bunch of weird, smelly, nasaloidal, snail-sucking scrotum surfers, their racism game does have a lot more to it than meets the eye. And frankly, I'm rather impressed. But hey, that's just my review. My race review. Thanks for watching.
That's it? I send you away for a month and you come back with this? Our viewers want to be scared. They need a boogeyman, a menace. Alright, I guess the real evil of the slime balls is that they were French all along. I'll run it anyway, but it's both our asses on the line. Now, I need something big. A real scoop. You're going to Brazil.
I followed that slimy escargot trail to its end and found nothing. You think you got the answers, but life's questions just breed even more questions. Right when I think I'm out, something always gets mentioned.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody just subscribe.